Brought to you by Take Root Training. Talking Potheads is a panel podcast for budtenders, bringing together experts from around the cannabis industry to discuss the fundamentals of selling weed in a dispensary. Each week, we dive into another topic to help budtenders understand these products and empower them on the sales floor. Grab some weed and your favorite munchies, and let's talk pot.
Welcome to the Talking Potheads. I'm your host, Riley.
And I'm your other host, Ashleen.
And we're the Chronic Gals.
On today's show, we're talking about probably the least understood item in an entire dispensary, and yet the grandest wealth of information, the certificate of analysis. Budtenders, do you know where to find the COAs in your store for every new batch? You should. In regulated cannabis markets, every product must be tested by a third-party analytics lab for potency, chemical composition, and the presence of undesirable molecules, such as heavy metals or pesticides. The results for each batch are required to be attached to every manifest as a certificate of analysis, and the requirements are different in different markets. There are a couple of problems surrounding COAs. Number one, many budtenders don't know how to read them or how to use them to help customers. And two, many analytics labs have been shown to give out faulty results, calling into the question the validity of facilities around the country. Today we're talking to Elly Englehart from CP Labs, who can help us understand these documents more. Welcome, Elly. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate the invite.
Absolutely. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself, where you work and your expertise, and maybe even which state you're in?
I'm in the state of Ohio. I work for CP Labs, as you just said. I got my biology degree at Vassar College. I went to Penn State University, where I got a master's degree in crop science. After that, I worked in a pesticide research lab for a couple years, where I worked actually, interestingly, with terpenes. Did a lot of GC mass spec work while I was there. And then after that, I worked at Battelle for 16 years, and Battelle is a DoD contractor. No pesticide work there, but it was still pretty relevant to this industry, actually. Like the types of tests performed were pretty similar. After I left Battelle, I came to CP Labs, and I've been here about a year now, and I love it.
That's awesome. Can you share with us one of your favorite strains or products that you are using right now?
So I'm a big fan of edibles. I really like the microdosing mints that a few companies offer. I like gummies. I have like, what is it? A drink mix that I got recently that was pretty good. It dissolves into pretty much any beverage you want to put it into. It's not flavored or anything. That's pretty nice.
Yes.
And I guess I have a favorite strain. It's cheetah piss. Love cheetah piss.
Oh, yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
What do you like about that strain?
You know, it's so strange to me. Like when I opened up the package, it had a certain odor to it.
As you might expect.
But when you use it, like either vaporize or combust it, it is amazing. It's just so floral and nice, and it's not what you expect at all. I really liked it. And I like the kind of high I got from it too. It was really lovely. It wasn't like, it was a very nice, I think it's an indica hybrid, if I remember correctly. It's not a sativa, but it was just a really nice kind of mellow high. I liked it. So.
Awesome. Love that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we briefly defined what the certificate of analysis was in the intro, but can you kind of explain a little bit more in depth about what it is?
Yeah, so a COA, I'm just going to call them COAs because it's shorter, if that's all right. So a COA is basically the report of the test results from the testing lab, and it summarizes the end result of all the testing. So like it sort of boils everything down into what the consumer or the producer or the consumer really need to know about their product, taking away like all of the other stuff. Like we deal with that, like there's a lot involved in getting to that point. Like there's a lot of QA, QC, a lot of other data. Sometimes depending on what state you're in, there might be one replicate run, there could be multiple replicate runs. It just sort of depends. Like there's different criteria among different states. And it just sort of boils down like the results of that testing. So like your cannabinoids, your pesticide results, your residual solvents, metals, all that stuff is on there. And it's, there so the consumer can assess, is this the product for them? Is it safe? Is it, the potency I want? Does it have the terpene profile I want? You know,
Do you think that most budtenders you're interacting with, or most budtenders in general, are aware of COAs and how to use them?
uh, no, honestly, I've kind of noticed that, and I try to talk to them about them because it actually is kind of a sticking point of mine, even with a lot of consumers, actually. Like the first thing I often say to people if they're asking questions about a product or if they're kind of poking around about it, I'm like, did you look up the COA? There's a barcode on the product. Did you scan it with your phone and look at the COA? And sometimes they say yes. Most of the time they say, I don't know what that is. And then I go on try to educate them because it's sort of like, actually, I was really happy to do this podcast because this is something that I've been trying to get out through social media and stuff, COA awareness, because a lot of people are concerned about pesticides, metals, and they don't even know how to look it up. Mm-hmm. So I will say that most of the states, like, the product won't even hit the shelves if it doesn't meet certain criteria. You know what I mean? That testing, there's thresholds there that are usually pretty conservative in terms of what's allowed. So generally speaking, if there's a COA and a product on the shelf, it passed the testing. So.
And you want those more conservative criteria, obviously, because if they have loose criteria, that means they're allowing heavy metals or pesticides or who knows what to pass through.
Yep. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I'm a big fan of it. I'm always tell people, friends, family, acquaintances, buy the stuff from the dispensary. Don't go to your plug. You don't know what's in it. Like, it could be adulterated. Like, that happens. Actually, like, my nephew passed away in April because he got adulterated street drugs. They were laced with fentanyl. Wow. But yeah, I mean, it happens. Like, you think it doesn't happen until somebody, it happens to them. And then even like the Delta 8 products, I don't know what you guys think about those, but they are not tested to the same standards as the stuff you can buy in a licensed dispensary. And that bothers me too, because you don't know what's in there at all. Like, it could be full of lead. You have no clue. Some of them will claim to have COAs, but if you try to look up the COAs for some of those products, you can't find it. Or
I've done that. Yeah. For certain CBD products, like hemp-based products. Yep. That's what one thing people will ask me sometimes is like, well, there's all the CBD options out there, all these hemp options. How do I even know which one is good? And it's like, well, do they have a COA? Are they willing to give you information about the product and how it tested? If not, then run away from that company.
Yep. It's probably full of pesticides because there's not even any regulations. I mean, there probably are some, I don't know what they are, but they're not the same as what it is for the medical or the recreational cannabis. And if there are, from what I've seen, at least in Ohio, getting those COAs for that gas station stuff or the head shop stuff, the Delta 8 or the Delta 10 or the HHC or all that other stuff, I struggled to find them myself because I was super curious. And the ones I found were like 3 years old. So, that didn't give me a good feeling.
Yeah, there was a couple of companies that we were asking for COAs for some CBD stuff. And like, I don't think the COA was accurate to the product that we were asking for. And they couldn't find the COA that we were asking for. So it was just like...
And then they couldn't explain the math.
Yeah.
They couldn't make the math make sense. And so we were like,
surprise me.
Maybe not.
Yeah. So...
Yeah. And there is a little bit of tricky math sometimes on the COAs, especially with like the THC. Like, a lot of people don't understand that THCA itself is not active. You need to decarb it, and then it becomes Delta 9. And the decarb, you heat it, you vaporize it, or depending what state you're in, you can't combust in Ohio. Other states, I think you can combust. I'm not sure, but Ohio you can't. But the heat during the combusting or the vaporization is what converts it into Delta 9. So the COA, sometimes the math looks a little weird because the conversion is only like 87% or 88% is 87.7 is 88%. So like The THCA, you actually have to multiply by like 0.877 to get like the actual active amount of compound that you're going to get in your final product. So that makes it look weird, because if you look at the COA and you look at the THCA and then you look at your total cannabinoids, they don't line up. But that's pretty normal, and it's because of that conversion.
That makes sense.
I do remember when I was bud tending, that was a huge question, because on the COAs, on the manifest, it'll say like total THCA, and it'll say total THC, and sometimes the THCA would say 24%, whatever it was, and then the total THC would say 0.8, whatever. It was a tiny number, so it took us a long time to kind of understand that the number that we should be telling customers is more in line with the THCA number, which was the 24% in my random
And
example.
that could be, so COAs.
It's very confusing.
So COAs are not standardized, at least in Ohio. Like other states, I don't know. I'm going to guess other states have it a little bit more ironed out, but they're not necessarily standardized. And what you wind up getting is different testing companies reporting different units. And sometimes the state requires a certain final reporting unit. So sometimes like part of the COA might be in like percent or milligrams per gram, but then the final reporting unit might be something else. And that is extra confusing. I get confused sometimes looking at them. I look at them and I go, oh, this is weird. This is in ppm. What's ppm? And then I got to whip out my calculator and start converting it myself, because they're all over the place.
Wow. So what do we do to bring it all together? What do we do to standardize it?
I would say the number one thing that consumers, I think, can do is ask for the COA, show interest in the COA, get on Reddit. Like I get on Reddit, and the number one thing that I say in comments, and this will make me really easy to find, by the way, did you look for the COA? Do you have the COA? Go find the COA, because the more you ask for it, the more they're going to be inclined to provide it. And then the more the consumer sees it, the more questions they're going to ask about it. And that's going to cause the industry to fall in line, because they're going to vote with their dollar on that. If they can read a COA, they're more likely to go buy products from that company. Whereas if the COA is super confusing, hard to find, a little bit weird looking maybe, then maybe they're not going to buy that product. At least, some consumers.
Yeah.
All right. So I go to my dispensary. I ask for my COA. I have it in my hand. How do I read it? What should I be looking for?
All right. So let me pull one up. I'm a visual person. I have one over here. I can't share it because it's got names on it. I'm just pulling it up for my reference. So like generally, the first thing you're probably going to see is the cannabinoids, and you're going to see a total THC, hopefully in percentage or in milligrams per gram. And that's the number that a lot of people probably care about quite a bit, So if you're looking at like dispensary plant material, you're probably going to see a number somewhere between 15 and 30, probably. And that total THC is your percent by mass THC. So if you see 20%, that means 20% of that plant's mass is THC. That's a lot.
And that's then we're seeing the 34 percenters, when you're supposed to question anything over 30%, because how can 30% of the little nug be THC? It's
a very good question, because the plant has other biological functions it needs to carry out to live, which is why you should probably be very suspicious if you see anything over 30%, or if you see high terpenes and high THC in a plant product. Because if you think about it, if you add those 2% together, because terpenes are also usually reported in percent, sometimes they're in milligrams per gram. It just kind of depends on the COA. But if you see more than 30% of the plant dedicated to something like THC or terpenes,
that's questionable.
How's it living? It's got to carry out other biological functions. There's other things it needs to do, like photosynthesize and,
right.
draw water from the ground. And you know what I mean? It needs to do other things. Now, granted, the stuff sent to test is generally what's going to be packaged. So we don't get like the whole plant, right? So there aren't stems. You don't get like the stalk in the middle. So hopefully that wouldn't also be 30% THC,
Right.
Yeah. A sticky stalk.
So it's possible for it to be over 30%, but I think it would have to be like perfect genetics, perfect nutrients, perfect everything. You know,
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
you might get 30%, anything over that, and I kind of start squinting at it myself. So
What is the average percentage of terpenes? I feel like
per
normally I see
plant
something around 4. Well, in the bud, like that you might see, get
in
in
the
the
bud,
dispensary. Yeah.
um, boy, that's a good question. I see a lot of 2%. I see a lot of 4%, sometimes 4%. 2.5, I think is probably pretty average. As I see a lot of 2.5. A lot of that can depend on the way in which it's being tested. Also, it depends also on like terpenes are not the easiest thing to test for. I have a lot of experience with them.
Hmm.
It's highly the instrumentation is really finicky because you run them on a GC mass spec. Um, and what kind of ends up happening is there's variability from lab to lab in which terpenes they look for. So depending on what's being tested, you might get terpene results that aren't representative. Usually plant is pretty accurate because they're pretty standard. There's about 12 terpenes really that are pretty common in the plant, and then the rest are all kind of minors that make up less than like, half of a percent of the
Mm.
plant's mass.
Okay.
It's more the concentrates where you might any given lab might not see everything because especially like some of the botanical vapes, they'll add things back in. And those botanical vapes, when they add things in, that might not be in their laboratory's testing protocol. So they may get deflated numbers, especially if they add like a lot of fruity things. Because some of the things, like they'll get these terpene mixes and it's, they call, they get it from whatever company they get it from and they add it into their vapes or into their concentrates or whatever. And it's not necessarily all terpenes, first of all. Sometimes it's other compounds, other flavorings. And we just don't test for those. Like most of the cannabis labs test for cannabis terpenes.
Mm.
I would
So
say
if they're terpenes that come from a different source, they may not be tested for. That's what we're
yeah,
saying.
they may not be tested
Okay.
for, yeah.
Oh,
They may not be
interesting.
tested for,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah.
So when you
If
say deflated numbers, it's just that the instrumentation isn't
Mhm.
sensitive enough to pick up all of the terpenes if they're
Yeah.
not coming from cannabis.
Yeah, if they're not coming from cannabis. But my guess
Okay.
is most people buying cannabis products are mostly interested in the cannabis terpenes anyway,
Yes. Yeah. Of course.
and not the added ones. So,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would say in plant material, if I saw more than 3.5 to 4%, that would raise my eyebrow a
Okay.
lot because there are ways to get more terpenes into your plant that aren't natural.
Mm.
You can infuse your bud. You know what I mean? It's possible to do that. Um, I just if you had perfect conditions, you might get up there, but perfect conditions are relative because really terpenes are the plant's stress response. So you could, if you had really stressed out plants, you might get higher terpenes. And some of the strains will have higher terpene profiles, but a lot of it depends on kind of how you treat and care for the plants
Yeah,
themselves.
and but then at the same time, if you're stressing out the plant in order to raise the terpenes, you could potentially be reducing the cannabinoid level because the
Mhm.
plant's not unhappy, right?
Yeah,
Is my
yeah,
logic
that,
leap there make
it's
sense?
possible. I'm not sure the mechanism by which the plant makes the THC, to be honest with
Okay.
you. So
Mm-hmm.
I can't say for sure. I'm not totally sure on that point, but if
Interesting.
you're stressing it out, you might be causing other problems.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Might be, yeah.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
Okay, so we're looking at the COA. We see our cannabinoids, or we see our THC. We see our terpenes. What else are we looking at on the COA?
Well, can I talk a little bit more about the cannabinoids?
Oh yeah,
So
please.
generally, yeah, that's all right. So generally, they're going to list off all the ones that lab tests for, and often the states will have a list of like cannabinoids that they require testing for. So you'll have a list, and generally, like those results will be listed either probably in percent or milligrams per gram. Would be my guess for most COAs. Ours are in milligrams per gram and percent by mass. So um, they typically, at least in Ohio, we only test for like the naturally occurring THC and cannabinoids. We don't look for any of the Delta 10, HHC, any of that other stuff, any of the synthetics or produced stuff. And then you'll have your terpenes, like you said. So you're also going to have your pesticides. And those vary wildly by state. So
Mm.
in Ohio, we don't test for that many. It's a pretty short list. Um, it's about 20. And some of them are approved pesticides and some of them are unapproved for use in cannabis pesticides. And generally speaking, you're going to see zeros because the limits are so low that pretty much if you see anything, it's probably going to fail, at least in Ohio.
Mm.
If you get a detect at all, it's very likely above their limit. It's probably like right there, so it's gonna probably fail. There's a few where you could get a little bit and not fail. You could have a small hit, so it's kind of worth looking at it and seeing if there were any hits for pesticides. But generally speaking, if there was any pesticides detected in there, it's probably not going to hit the shelves.
Good.
That's
At
kind
least
of
in
good to
Ohio.
know.
At least in
Oh,
Ohio,
yeah,
like I know
that's true.
California has a much longer list, and I don't know what their limits are. So it's possible there that some of them might be, you could have a small amount of something in there. And not all the pesticides are actually pesticides. Some of them are like growth inhibitors or growth regulators for plants that are banned for use in cannabis, just for various reasons. Like they can generally, these things would be used in horticulture to like increase yield, that kind of thing. But they do have some like health impact or some environmental impacts, so they're banned for use in cannabis. And there's some fungicides too. And at least in Ohio, there's one synergist, which is just something that's added to pesticides to enhance their effects so you can use less pesticide, but it's also toxic itself, so it's on the list. Yeah.
Dang.
Well, glad they're on the list.
Yeah. So you're also probably going to see microbials. It's important to note that different products do get different tests. So some products, like at least in Ohio, like the final like processed products that have been previously tested do not necessarily get all the testing on the final product because the ingredients that went into it were tested. So those tests don't need to be duplicated again in the final product. So you might, if you look up the COA, you're probably only going to see the processed product COA and not any of the COAs for the ingredients. I personally think that's a little problematic.
Yeah.
Because it would be nice to see that, because some of the tests that aren't required on the final product would be nice to be able to see the results of. But again, they wouldn't be able to use those ingredients if they failed. But also, it's kind of nice to test the final product for everything because you don't know what really something could have happened to it at some point between point A and point B. But that's just me, So microbials, and that's just, they look for, aerobic bacteria, coliforms, E. coli, yeast and mold. We never see any of that. Occasionally we get small hits for yeast and mold on some of the flour, but the rest of it, aerobic bacteria we might see a little bit because that's a pretty normal thing to see. But, I think like any E. coli fails like a batch. So,
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Then you shouldn't have really E. coli on your anything. It really shouldn't be there. So
yeah. I mean, there's poop everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Where's there poop doing in your facility?
Yeah.
It's pretty much. I would be really concerned if I ever saw that. I might.
Call for some deeper
investigations.
Yeah, I might have some questions about that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Metals. Generally, metals. So metals are in Ohio, it's pretty much just arsenic, cadmium, lead, and mercury. Other states test for more metals. I think they might be adding some because rec was just legalized in December here, and it's not totally implemented yet. They're still working on some of the regulations, and I thought I heard they might add one, but I could be wrong about that. I'm pretty sure other states also test probably for lithium. I could be wrong again about that one. Again, the limits are really low. And it's not uncommon to get really small hits for some of them, because it's especially arsenic, I think. But it's usually so low that it's like below our LOQ even. You know what I mean? Like, so the LOQs are pretty low for those, or the state limits are pretty low. I mean, I'm sorry about that. The state limits are pretty low in Ohio, at least. It's really unusual to see a metals hit in plant material. Like, that would be weird.
Yeah.
Um, Now for uh, concentrates, occasionally. Now, this is interesting. So different states have different ways of testing their concentrates. In Florida, the way it's done is they test the concentrate right out of the final vape cart. So it's
Okay.
in the vape cart and they take it out for testing. And it's actually really time consuming and difficult from what I understand. But that is a good way to do it because you're testing the concentrate and you're testing the parts in the vape too that way. Because those parts came from somewhere. There's metal in there. You know, where did they come from?
Right.
China, maybe? I don't know. Ohio only tests the concentrate. We do not test the concentrate in the vape cart. And that's really important for consumers to know because
Is it common for metal to leach into the concentrate?
it could from the vape cart. It absolutely could. Yep.
Interesting. Okay.
Especially once it heats up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely possible.
Okay. Yeah. So then it makes way more sense to test it out of the cartridge.
Yeah. And I think that's something that consumers need to be aware of because if they were looking at their COAs and they read up and were more educated on the testing, they could make requests. You know, they could be vocal about it. But right now, they can't be vocal about it because a lot of the information, I think, is pretty hard to find. So mycotoxins, that's usually thrown in with the pesticide analysis, at least in Ohio. Just looking for fungal contaminants. It's pretty standard. The limits are really low. I don't believe we've ever had at this lab a detect for it. I would be concerned on that one because that basically means you have fungus growing on your plant.
Right.
Let's see here. Water activity. So that's an interesting one. I don't know if every state does this. I'm sure that they probably do. So that's like a number that the important part here is that a number over 0.6 means it's still active and it could still possibly be having some bacterial activity, or it's possible for yeast and mold or other things to grow on it after it's packaged if the water activity is too high on it.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that one's actually important to look at, especially if you're maybe buying product that's been on the shelf for a while. So that's another one that people might want to look at because that could indicate that COA, if that product has been on the shelf for like 3 months, 6 months, close to a year, if that water activity was too high, that product might be not great anymore. It might have been great at the time of testing, but it could be, not so awesome.
Not so great.
Interesting.
Yeah. Let's see. Residual solvents. I've almost forgot about that one because I pulled up a dispensary plant COA to look at. Don't usually do residual solvents on dispensary plant material because there shouldn't, under what circumstances would there be any solvents there? So that's usually on concentrates and products. And that one basically, so there's different ways of extracting and distilling like the THC from the weed, right? So like there's the CO2 extraction, there's the cold extraction, and then there's other solventless types of extraction, but then there's also the solvent extractions. So basically any solvent-based product is one that had solvents involved somewhere in the extraction process, and those products and ingredients have to be tested for the residual solvents.
So that's like your BHO, your propane, ethanol, these kinds of products.
Yeah. So it's like butane, ethanol, isopropyl alcohol is one of them here. Trying to remember the other ones. Benzene, which hopefully isn't involved in any process, but that's one I think that gets tested for safety. And it could be something that maybe they use to clean some equipment, but that's a pretty nasty one. The level for that one is pretty low. Heptane they look for. Or we look for. So yeah, it's pretty important. That test I like that one. It's fun. So
Anything else on the COA that we want to keep an eye out for? I mean, we've gone over pretty thoroughly, I think, most of the sections.
Yeah, that's most of the sections. I would say the most important parts to pay attention to are the micro, because most of the COAs will still show like it'll show that it passes or that it fails. Well, it should never fail. You'll never be looking at one as a consumer that fails, but it'll still show you what like how much was there, if any. So I find it kind of valuable to look at those to see if there was any yeast or mold there, because typically there it should be pretty low. Let's put it that way. So if you're seeing something close to the limit for yeast and mold, I would think about that a little bit.
Are the limits on the COA?
They are in Ohio.
Okay.
Yeah, they have the limits on there.
I think they are in Washington too. I'm pretty sure I've seen them.
Yeah, it's like 0 for E. coli and Salmonella.
Okay.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and then those limits, they may be different between different products, because I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly here, that like solvent-based products and non-solvent-based products have different limits.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So.
Interesting.
Yeah, why would that be? Just because there's solvents and then no solvents?
Yeah, that's a good question, to which I was not prepared to answer.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah. Yeah,
Legislature.
I'm not really sure why.
Yeah, probably, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, and then for like edibles and topicals and stuff, we won't necessarily get a COA for the end product, but it'll be for the ingredients.
It'll be for the end product, but not for the ingredients.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because they're processed products. So like the only thing that would be on that COA is the potency, micro, and this is in Ohio. So the potency of the micro and filth and foreign matter, which I totally forgot about. Filth and foreign matter, now that I'm looking at that. So filth and foreign matter is just basically is exactly what it sounds like. You take a subsample of the sample, you put it under a microscope, and you look for foreign matter. And
so like dirt,
like, bugs. There's like a whole list of things that we look for. Like there's dirt, bugs, rat excrement, hairs, fibers, that kind of stuff. Generally speaking, never seen any. So
yeah.
yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an intro. That test is, I think they need to standardize that test, because there's no, at least in Ohio, there's no guidance given for that test. So it's just, so we kind of followed like the food industry's example for that one. So yeah.
Interesting.
Fascinating. What kind of testing do you do? Like I mean, I'm just envisioning you behind like a microscope with like a nug and then looking at the nug. What kind of tests are you running?
Me personally?
Yeah.
So I'm the scientific director. So generally I kind of oversee the whole lab, but I do go in there sometimes because I like to move around and I like to be involved, and I don't think that at any point anybody should feel that any task is below them. You know what I mean? Like I don't like that.
Yeah.
So I will frequently run terpenes because that's my jam. I have 23 years of experience on that instrumentation. So, and experience with terpenes. So that's the first one I'll step in and run personally. And I've done potency. I can do almost any of the tests here really. But terpenes is the one I do most often. But yeah, so it's funny because like there's a lot of prep work that goes into getting those samples to run on those instruments. So like there's like subsampling, quartering, homogenization. Then we have to extract them with like different solvents, and then there's often like surrogates and IS, and then there's dilutions and QC calibrations. Like there's an insane amount of work that goes into producing these COAs. It's ridiculous.
How long does that process
Yeah.
take? Like for one sample, like once you've received a sample, when do you pump out the COA? How long does it take?
3 days is our
Okay.
turnaround time because it's very competitive market in Ohio right now for labs.
Mm.
So right now we're all pretty much, from what I understand, doing a 3-day turnaround, which is tight.
Mm.
That
That's
is
what I was gonna say.
super tight to take that sample that you get and all the other 100 samples you get with it and turn them
Mm-hmm.
around in 3 days, especially for micro, because micro needs a few days to grow. So,
Mm.
so I think actually it's more like 4 days because if we get it after a certain time, we start calling that the next. So it's 4 days.
Yeah.
It's kind of how we have it worked out. But we do prelims usually like next day by 10 o'clock for potencies because a lot of the clients are interested in knowing that potency number early because they need it for their packaging. And they also want to know, like, did I hit my target?
Right.
You know, is this 20% weed or 19%? You know, is my vape 70%? Is it 69? That's a big deal in Ohio because there's a 70% cap on concentrates here. So that's a big one. They want to know, did I hit my mark? Um, but that is a tight turnaround time because micro takes 2 days to grow. So if something happened to that test, like incubator went down in the middle of the night and all the plates are ruined, there's no time there for retesting really. It's tight. And
Right.
terpenes are tight too because that is a long run on that instrument. Those take about 40 minutes each to run on the instrument, and often you have to do several dilutions of them to make sure you get them like in the right part of your calibration curve. So yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, it's pretty tight.
Yeah. We've heard we don't like pesticides. We don't want
Mm-hmm.
pesticides in our plants.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I feel like culturally it's pretty obvious you want to stay away from pesticides, but like what do they actually do? Why are they so problematic?
So it depends on which pesticide we're talking about. So there's a few on the list in Ohio that aren't actually that hazardous for humans, but they are for bees.
Oh.
Um, yeah, so I think they're on there just to make sure nobody's using them. Because I was trying to figure that one
Mm.
out earlier because I actually was like, oh, I put together like a little cheat sheet actually for pesticides because there's so many, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I can't know all of them. So I put together a little cheat sheet. And as I was going through it, I was like, oh, this is just harmful for bees. And after doing a deep dive, it was like, because it was literally, it's one of the unapproved pesticides that we aren't supposed to be using in Ohio. So I'm going to guess that it's on there just to make sure that they're not using it.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them, though, are really nasty for humans, especially like organophosphates, which are cholinesterase inhibitors. Those are pretty bad. I worked with cholinesterase inhibitors for like 23 years, and they are nasty. So that's why you don't want them on your weed. Um, the limits are pretty low. I will say generally the limits are so low that even if they're low for a reason because it's cumulative exposure, right? So that's probably why. But I mean, if you somehow accidentally got that amount of most of these pesticides, you wouldn't, you would never know. But yeah, the organophosphates pretty bad.
And when you say they're bad and nasty, is that like they cause lung issues? Is it, and I know you said over a long term of exposure. I'm just curious because I don't think I've ever
So
actually talked to anybody about this.
so organophosphates can be carcinogenic. It kind of depends on which one.
Mm.
Um, but they can cause cholinesterase inhibition. They can cause neurological problems
Mm.
if you
Okay.
get a high enough dose of it over time. But, you know, it's relative because honestly, the stuff that you put on the back of your dog's neck to keep the fleas off, that's an organophosphate. Or at least it used to be. They may have changed it, but that's generally it's an organophosphate, and you're putting actually quite a bit on the dog. Um, so yeah, it can cause some issues. You definitely don't want to inhale it. You know, uh,
Yikes.
let me see here. Yeah, there's several organophosphates on Ohio's list, like dichlorobos. Some of them are unapproved. Dichlorobos is unapproved. It's got a really long uh, half life in the environment. So the reason that they test So here's something to know. The reason that we test for unapproved pesticides isn't just to make sure nobody's using them, but it's to make sure that like they didn't linger around in your environment or there wasn't some sort of other contamination, because that can actually happen, like drift from somewhere else, or sometimes it could be something got brought in and it had it on it and it got on your product. Believe it or not, that's a thing that can happen.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And these limits are low enough that you will catch it if that happens.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm thinking last year, I don't know, we've been having bad forest or wildfires here in Washington. And I think a lot of the outdoor farms got into some, like their crops weren't great because of all the smoke that was coming in to their farms. So that's a bummer. But
Yeah.
I could see like the how things can fly in and
yeah, drift is a thing. So in Ohio, I'm pretty sure it's all indoor grows. I think there's outdoor hemp grows, but I don't think I don't think there's outdoor grows for marijuana yet here. So it's not as much of a concern.
Totally.
But it can still happen because, you have a whole greenhouse full of people and they may not know what's okay and what's not okay. I mean, I could see situations where somebody might bring in a can of Raid, because they saw some ants. You know what I mean? Like, it could happen. So it's important to do the testing. I mean, it's, you can definitely catch some things. And also, like, I forgot to bring it up, but like, even like heavy metals, the arsenic. So you could get that in your flour if you had arsenic treated lumber as part of your setup, because it can leach into the soil. And that's something that I've heard has been an issue, not necessarily in Ohio, but like in some growers have had that problem.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's, it's kind of crazy. And sometimes you just don't think of where things might be coming from.
Yeah.
Or, it's entirely possible that they think they're spraying one thing on their plants and it's actually something else too. Like they may get like a mix that, it says it's like organic essential oils or whatever, but then it's got something else in it, like it could have, to make it, you know what I mean, to make it work better. They might sneak something in because maybe that product wasn't tested well itself. So it's important to test.
Dang.
Wow. So there's a lot of pesticides that are hard-nosed. But then there's things like neem oil that we'll see on our packaging, that they declare and make sure that but in my head, neem oil is kind of a pesticide. It's like a natural pesticide.
Yeah.
What about these kinds of products like neem oil or others?
So they're not tested for, but that doesn't mean that they shouldn't be. So my issue with stuff like that, I don't like it, because there's not a lot of testing on neem oil or any of those natural or essential oil treatments at all. So we might not know what the toxicity or the carcinogenic properties, or if it's a teratogen, causes birth defects. We just might not have enough data out there. Whereas the pesticides, like, they are tested like pretty thoroughly. We know what the LD50 is. We know what the WPL, or the workplace population limit, like I forget what it is, the limit that you can be exposed to, like in a workplace or in your out and about in your life, daily life. We have all that data. That's all available. You can actually Google it. Neem oil? I don't know. I've heard of folks putting, what is it? It's another essential oil. The name's escaping me. I've heard of other ones though, and I'm like, where's the data on that? Does it even do what you think it's doing?
Right.
And if it does, is it safe? I don't know. And nobody's testing for it because you can't test for everything. You know what I mean? And is it even neem oil? I mean, because how do you know?
Right.
It could be, like I said, something that somebody is marketing is neem oil, because that's not regulated either. Like the pesticides, you buy a container of pesticide, you can be darn sure, like if it's from like, a known company, that it's probably going to have what it says on the package, right? There's probably a COA out there for that product that you bought. But that neem oil, I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, could be pesticide that they put in there to make sure it works, so you come back and buy more. Don't know. Although hopefully whatever you're putting it on gets tested, somewhere. But if you're using it like at home, you don't know. And there's also other things in there because it's not going to be pure neem oil, probably. It's probably going to be cut with like surfactants and things to help it aerosolize if they're spraying it on. And what's the safety of that stuff? Don't know.
Right.
Yeah, so I get a little uncomfortable when I hear about the essential oils and all the other stuff that they're putting on the marijuana, or really any crop, It's just kind of like what's the half-life of it in the environment? What are the environmental effects of it? What are the health effects of it? A lot of it's just not studied.
So as a pesticides expert, when you are picking your marijuana products that you want to take home and smoke or consume, what growth practices do you look for as like in a personally approved farm?
I do like sustainability. So I try to look at their practices, like sustainability wise, because I figure if they're trying to be sustainable and responsible environmentally, that they're probably, not going to dump a bunch of nasty stuff on their plants. So that's kind of what I look for is I look for like, what's their carbon footprint, try to look up what they're doing for the environment, what do they do with their green waste, that kind of stuff. It's some small indication of, are they trying, and if they're trying, they're probably not doing anything that's going to, give me cancer. So, yeah.
Good advice.
Also,
that is good advice.
I will say that processed products are a lot less likely to have pesticides in them just because the process of extraction and distillation and all that is going to dilute out or just eliminate a lot of the pesticides and other contaminants actually too. So.
Cool. Good to know.
Yeah. That's good for a budtender to know,
Yeah,
when someone's coming
and
in.
Honestly, the higher the THC percent, like the less chance of there being other stuff in there too, right? If you think about that, like if it's like
by mass, that makes sense.
Yeah, if it's 99% THC, it doesn't leave a lot of room for anything else. So, yeah.
0.1 for the percentage bros.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, so there have been a lot of reports of cannabis analytics lab producing incorrect reports, whether knowingly or unknowingly. Why do you think this is such a problem?
Well, when you say why is it such a problem, why is it a problem for the consumer or why is it happening? Or do you mean both?
A
little bit of both. Why do you think it's happening and why? Yeah.
I think we can figure out why it's a problem for the consumer.
Yeah.
Because obviously if they're not getting the right information, they're not getting the right information.
Good. It's lack of regulation, I think, because it's a state by state thing, right? So each state is kind of coming up with their own rules. And as they go, some states might look at other states and go, oh, that looks good, I'm going to pick that. Oh, that looks good, I'm going to pick that. But then it's also the people putting together the regulations aren't scientists. So they put down what they think they should be, but it doesn't always make sense. And then they don't necessarily prescribe exactly how you get to that answer. And they may leave it up to the labs to figure that out. And that varies also a lot state by state because some states allow labs to be associated with like the producer or the grower, right? And that's pretty much the only way there is a lab is that like producer or grower has a lab associated with it and that's their lab. Some of them, I think, I'm not positive, have state labs. Not sure, actually. That would be one way to go. I don't know if that's actually happening. And in Ohio, it's independent labs. So, you're an independent lab and you get clients and then you test the client products and you generate a COA. So basically, I boil that down to lack of regulation because it varies wildly. And a lot of the regulations, if you go and you read the rules and codes, it's open for interpretation in a lot of areas. And depending on the type of company, they might look at it and go, oh, there's a loophole. You know what I mean? Like they could look at it and go, oh, I can do it this way. I can do it that way. Where is it science? And I mean, honestly, like there are tests out there except for cannabinoids, tests exist for all this in other industries. if you think about it.
Right.
The food industry has been around for a long time, and a lot of these samples and products aren't that different from food.
Right.
So, but they don't require it to be tested the same way as food.
Right.
Hmm.
So what would some green flags be for cannabis labs that maybe a dispensary a processor would be like, I want to send my products to you guys because I know I can trust what you guys are doing.
Consistent results would be one thing. Like, so if they can replicate the results, that's pretty big. They should look at what kind of QC they do, what kind of data review they have would be important. They should be looking at, honestly, they should be interested in labs that don't just pump out a 30% potency for flower. I'm going to say that out loud. If I were a grower or producer, I would probably, and I was actually interested in the quality of my product, I might go for a lab that just gave me the result. Like, just here it is, it's 28%, it's 25%, but definitely consistency, because if you start, if you get like a big variability in results, that would be a red flag for a grower producer. Variability in results would be a huge red flag. Or if they said, oh, let me retest this, or, oh, geez, constant problems, that would be a red flag. Let me think of other green flags here. There's more. If I toured a lab, I would want it to be neat and organized. That would be a green flag. Knowledgeable staff, green flag. I would want to look at the SOPs if I could, the standard operating procedures. So that's like something every lab should have in place. It's usually required if you have an ISO accreditation. That's another green flag, ISO accreditation A2LA. That would be a green flag. Any other accreditations would be a green flag. Staff that are involved with the ASTM standards, that would be a green flag. Let me think here. I would say not just getting answers when you want them, but if somebody says to me, I don't know the answer to that, I need to go look into it. That to me is a green flag. I don't like it when somebody just says something,
Same.
you know what I mean? Just to give me an answer. Like, I like hearing, I need to go look into that. I need to go look at the data. That to me is a green flag. Whereas if it's, well, why is this like this? And then the person I'm talking to just gives me an answer, but they're like not a lab person, but they gave me an answer. I don't know. So yeah, that would be a green flag.
Awesome. Amazing. Good insight.
Now I want to go tour a lab.
Yeah, we haven't been to a lab
I was
yet.
gonna say that would be another thing. Like, I would think that like being invited to tour the lab would also be a green flag, So, but usually I don't think it's hard to get a tour. So,
yeah, you just gotta ask.
Yeah, you just gotta ask.
Follow Chronic Gals for the
lab tour.
So what can budtenders do to help maintain the checks and balances with processors to make sure there's clean cannabis?
So I would say budtenders, it would be good if they, one thing that they could do is they could scan those barcodes themselves, if it's the same way in every state, and get the COAs and look at them themselves. That would be good. And then even making them available to customers when they come in. Because sometimes, like, I don't know if every dispensary works like this, but in Ohio, like, you can't use your phone. So if you were looking at a product, you can't even touch the product in the dispensary, really. So you would not be able to, in the dispensary, when you're trying to make a purchase, in theory, pull out your phone and scan the COA, scan the barcode to get the COA right there in the dispensary. So if you are in a dispensary like that, it would be good if you could make those COAs available to people who want to see them. I know sometimes they'll let me pull out my phone and scan the barcode and get a COA, but they're not supposed to in Ohio really let you have your phone out.
Yeah.
So
Interesting. I didn't know
Interesting.
that.
Yeah, at least I don't know if it's a law, but most of the dispensaries won't let you for whatever reason.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
so I think that's something that they could do. Bud tenders being knowledgeable about how to read the SOPs would be good too, or SOPs, COAs would be good too, because chances are the consumers are going to have a harder time reading them. But if the
Yeah.
bud tenders got them, got educated on that themselves and could interpret the COAs for the consumers, that would probably be really helpful, and it would help that dispensary too, because I mean, I know my stuff, right? But I love a bud tender that knows their stuff. I
Totally.
love going
Yes.
into a dispensary and having a bud tender that is honest and tells me the truth and doesn't try to, I don't know, put the hard sell on, but also like that they understand like what's on the COA. Like I love that. I geek out over it. It's great. It's like one of my favorite things. What aggravates me personally when I go into a dispensary is when they try to give me some kind of woo, like
Mm.
something that just isn't a real thing. I'm not going to give any examples because some people would get, if anybody really likes terpenes, they would get probably pretty bent out of shape about what I have to say. But um, you know, I would say those things like being knowledgeable about COAs and being able to make them available for the consumers would be like a big move in the right direction, at least in Ohio. Because right now I go in there and I ask for the COA and no, I'm probably not going to see it. In fact, they will sometimes, I'll go in and I'll ask sometimes for fresher flower. If I look at it, if they bring it out and I look at it and it was tested like 6 months ago, I'll be like, come on, bring me
Yeah.
something else. Like this is probably at this
Yeah.
point, 5% lower at least than what it says on that package. So
Mm-hmm.
they don't even really want to do that. So getting a COA is like pulling teeth. But it's also hard.
Yeah.
Sometimes some of
Yeah.
the producers and growers also getting a COA from them can be difficult too. Like they're supposed to be available through that barcode. And if they are not, I highly recommend everybody email that producer or grower and let them know that they can't get that COA or that the COA was an older one and not from that batch or lot number or whatever, because that happens too. Sometimes I scan the barcode and it's a different product entirely or a different lot of a different harvest.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
I highly recommend people being sticklers. And if bud tenders did that, that would be a good start. That would be like a, you know what I mean? It would be a significant increase from like the 5 of us doing it now to, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? To like every bud tender, that would be pretty
Yeah.
significant. And then, if it got passed along to consumers, it'd be even more significant. And then, I mean, that's how you hold people's feet to the fire. I mean, that's how capitalist
Mm-hmm.
systems, the capitalist market is supposed to work. It's supposed to be, consumer
Yeah.
driven, but it can only be
Right.
consumer driven if you have the right data in front of you.
Exactly. Yeah, I think we've polled the bud tenders that are around here, and none of them knew what a COA was, or none of them knew how to find the COA, even though each COA should be packaged with each batch of product. I don't know if they just like toss it out the window or what, but it would be an easy binder.
Mm-hmm.
Just put it in a
That's what you
binder.
should do. I mean,
Or
that's what I have to do with, because we also get COAs for some of the items that we use for testing, and we're required to keep those. Like we have to have them on file. We need to be able to show them. Like if I used a set of stocks to make calibration standards for potency or terpenes, there was a COA associated with those stocks that I made those standards from. So I need to be able to show that COA to any of those clients that want to see it. If they ever come in and they have questions, I need to be able to produce everything that went into testing. It's a lot. And I would
Yeah.
think, that it wouldn't be too difficult for them to do what you said. To just, if all I had to do was put it in a binder, oh my God, my life would be so easy. That would be so amazing.
right?
But that is not all I have to do here.
Yeah.
I have to do some crazy stuff. So
Yeah, when I was budtending here in Washington, you are required to have the COA with each batch, and the dispensary is required to have it available for any customer who asks. But if a customer were to ask, it would probably take somebody 15 to 20 minutes to get it out of the computer, print it. I think it's been, probably since 2020 since I budtended, so it's people could have updated their processes. But I mean, that's how it was when we began the industry. And I know that there's a ton of emerging markets right now that are going to be running into the same problems. So yeah, if you create a process to get those COAs in a binder or the barcodes, make them accessible, will make it easier for everybody.
Yeah. And I feel like it would behoove the growers and producers to make those more available, because the Delta 8, the Delta 10, all that other synthetic stuff, they're certainly not going to ever make their COAs available, because it would show possibly, I don't know for sure. This is just my educated guess. I don't know this for sure. I'm putting all these caveats on it because I don't want to get in trouble for saying this one. But my guess is if you pulled some of those Delta 8 gummies and you tested them, that you would find more than 0.3% Delta 9 in them. That's just a guess.
Yeah, probably.
Just a guess. And you'd probably also find like a bunch of other garbage that's not supposed to be in there because it was made in God knows where, God knows how, and packaged. I don't know. You know what I mean? So like one big distinction that the licensed growers and producers can make between them and those other guys is that we maybe cost a little more, but we have this that shows that you are getting what you paid for. That shows that this is 25% THC and it has no metals, no pesticides, and it's good stuff, good kind bud. Here you go. Whereas you go into those head shops, man, I don't know what that is. It doesn't look good. If you looked at it, it doesn't look good.
Yeah.
It looks old.
It just looks kind of
sad. Well, that's because
and old.
It does. It's because a lot of that stuff, they spray it back on. Like Delta 8 Delta 8 isn't really even, it does occur a little, like small amounts naturally, but really like in flower, like it's mostly THCA, and when you decarb it, you get the Delta 9, right? So when you're buying Delta 8 flower, it's sprayed on. It's not like in there really. So it's sort of synthesized from CBD. It's very sketchy. So,
and don't you have to use like crazy amounts of CBD to even
I'm
get
pretty sure,
usable amounts of Delta 8?
I'm pretty sure. I haven't done it.
That's what I understand.
I haven't done a deep dive on it yet, but it seems to me from what I've read about the process that, you would probably need to use a lot, but I don't know for sure. Right. Yeah, and it's just, it's not natural. I'll tell you that much.
Right.
So, yeah. So but it will get you. Oh my goodness. Sorry. Just, you can edit this out, right? Okay.
Yeah.
My light's on a timer. I'm sorry about that. But
it's okay.
No worries.
Yeah. So what was I going to say? Oh, the Delta 8. Yeah. So the flower looks dank because it's like just dried hemp flower and they spray it back on. And then THCA flower is super sketchy. That THCA hemp flower, I don't know. I mean, it's just basically
we have
weed. I mean, it's
they're
just calling
we have some
flower.
THC, like regular rec flower that has THCA isolate sprayed on it, and it looks like those cows with the growth hormone, and they're like poof, 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 like their muscles are all crazy, like that's what the flower looks like. It's like white and crystally, and I don't know, I feel like it's redundant maybe.
I mean, it's just a loophole that they're exploiting, and it just, I don't know, like I feel safer buying the tested dispensary marijuana. I just think that's the way to go. And actually, like, I find often the head shops are more expensive anyway, because I'll go and we'll walk through occasionally because I want to go in and get like some glassware or something, or maybe I need a new grinder, and I'll check out the other products, and it's like it's actually not cheaper than the dispensary. It's actually more expensive. And in fact, I went to Cannapalooza over this past weekend. It was a small, like little kind of Ohio producer thing, and it was a combination of hemp and marijuana. And I actually noticed that a lot of the hemp gummies were more expensive than the dispensary gummies because there was a booth there that was trying to sell microdoses. Basically, it was 5 gummies in a pack, 2.5 milligrams of THC Delta 9 per gummy. So it's the Farm Bill loophole, right? Because the gummies weighed like 5 grams or something. But then they had CBC in it too, and they were trying to sell those for like twice what I would pay for gummies in a dispensary.
Jeez.
Yeah, and I was just like, whoa.
So stupid.
Whoa.
And that money's not even going to the taxes that like the regulated market's money is going towards.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
And so you would, yeah, that actually is kind of bothersome too, the tax situation there. That like,
yeah. That's a whole nother episode. I do want to shout out a company in Oregon that does have their COAs available to the public. It's Extractioneering. They do excellent concentrates. And on their website, you can look up every like you look on your packaging and you look at the batch number and you can find the batch number COA on the website. You can there's like a QR code. It's super accessible. There's so much information on their website, and so Extractioneering is definitely doing it right, and it's showing that like it can be done. That COAs can be available for everybody.
They definitely can be, and they should be, for sure. And I know in Ohio, and actually, I believe I can't say the name of the company. A lot of them should be available online through that QR code, but for some reason, a lot of the times when I scan those QR codes, they're not available, and I don't know why. It should be relatively easy to do, though. You know, they really should be there for the consumer. I mean, that's sort of the whole point of the testing. So it's kind of like, why are we, you know, basically it's getting treated like a pass-fail. You know what I mean? Like it's getting treated like the whole thing is getting treated like pass-fail. Oh, there's our THC number. We're going to slap that on the packaging, and we're going to take the top 3 terpenes and put those on the packaging, and then we're going to call it a day. You know, I mean, I guess, you know, okay, to be fair, it did pass all the other testing, and in theory it's safe, but it sure would be nice, you know, if the consumers could just look at that and verify for themselves, you know, and then they could look and see, like, was there any CBD in there? Was there any CBG? I would like to know, you know, or what were the minor terpenes? You know, I would, you know, I could see somebody wanting to know that. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, we've learned a lot today, Elly. Thank you so much for all of your wonderful insight. Just to kind of wrap it all up, we talked about COAs, which are test results that accompany each batch of cannabis and cannabis products. Producers are required to test for every batch for potency, chemical composition, and the presence of undesirables, but the requirements may differ by state. Budtenders and customers can use COAs to identify products with minor cannabinoids or certain terpenes present that can help induce a desired effect, and they can verify the lack of heavy metals or pesticides available in a product or present in a product. And then together, we can work as a community to hold producers and labs accountable for accurate testing. Do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to share?
Personally, I wouldn't take my chances on anything that wasn't tested, that I couldn't, you know, verify in some way that it was tested and that it's safe. I know a few people personally who will still buy from their plug. You know what I mean? Like they'll buy, you know, stuff that they probably really shouldn't be buying, and it just, don't do that. You know, it worries me. Like I mentioned my nephew earlier, like it's dangerous. It's there could be anything in there, and I'm not even okay. Pesticides, you're probably not going to die even if they coated it in Raid. You smoke a blunt, like maybe you get cancer in 20 years and you never know why. I don't know, but like it's not going to kill you. But fentanyl's in like a lot of street drugs now, a lot. And I just personally would not take my chances on that one.
Well, and we have so many options now. There's so much availability. I mean, at least in the legal states.
Well, even
why take the
with
chance?
the Farm Bill loophole, really, you can, I mean, you know, I don't like the gas station stuff, but even if you're in a not approved state, you can still get a gummy that's got a couple milligrams of Delta 9 in it. You know, I mean, it's still possible. So, I just, that even a gummy, if you just get it from like a, you know, somewhat reputable source, it's fine. Some of the CBD places will have some like low dose Delta 9 gummies, and you can usually, some of them you get a COA from. So, you know, if you can get a COA that's current and matches the lot number on the package, that's, you know, it's probably okay. So, but I would not buy anything from a head shop that I can't get a COA for. And for the legal marijuana, I mean, you know, it's in the dispensary, it's safe if it made it there, but you should still demand to see that COA so you can see the test results and you can determine for yourself if it's something you want to have. Because I forgot to mention earlier, different states have different levels for yeast and mold. And if you have respiratory issues, you might care if there's a small number of CFU in there for yeast and mold. I should have I totally forgot about that. Like that might matter to some patients with lung problems. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So ask for your COAs.
COA.
Weird, they'll
That's
change.
the takeaway.
Yeah.
Ask for your COA. Demand to see it. You know, try to not take no for an answer.
Right. Love
Heck
that.
yes.
Love that. All right, Elly, tell everyone where they can find you if you want on the internet.
You can find me at my blog, which is maryjanenerd.com. I just started it. There's not a lot there yet, full disclosure. I'm working on it. I'm actually working. It's funny, when I first heard about you guys, I'm working on a blog post about COAs. Still working on it. It's almost done. I have 2 teenagers, so sometimes my time to like do writing and stuff is kind of limited. But I'm going to get it out there soon. And then there will be some, I want to address botanical vapes at some point. The nomenclature for some of the concentrates. I have a whole list of things that I'm going to blog about coming up, because there's just been a lot of stuff in the industry that is either confusing or unclear or maybe concerning. So, yeah.
Well, if you're in the cannabis industry, that sounds like a blog worth following.
Yes.
So definitely go check it out. You said maryjanenerd.com?
Yep, maryjanenerd.com. Yep.
Heck yeah.
Yep.
Amazing.
Love it.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. Listeners, please stay tuned for the Budtender Buzzline. So you want to be a budtender? Ditch the beginner blues and get ready to bloom into the cannabis connoisseur you were meant to be. Toss those dusty textbooks and cryptic forums. Root Knowledge, a budtender's guide to cannabis, is your personal cannabis professor. An online course packed with bite-sized lessons, sharp quizzes, and case studies that'll have you recommending products like a pro. Master the science, crush customer service, and unlock the secrets of every product on the shelf. You'll be a canna expert, empowering customers and leaving them high on life. Enroll in Root Knowledge today and plant the seeds of your cannabis industry success. Visit takeroottraining.com to sign up today. I love talking with weed nerds.
Same.
And Elly had so much information to share with us
Who
today.
knew that COAs could actually be so interesting?
Exactly.
Like, I didn't.
I mean, all the budtenders should know about COAs. Now you will really know about COAs.
And if you're going to share any episode of this podcast, share this one. Because the COAs are so underutilized in the industry, and there's so many good nuggets of information on there. So
especially if you're one of those people out there who are tracking their journey and using the apps or using a journal and really want to dial in the information, you know, ask for the COA, get that detailed information. And also, the more we use them, the more we're going to hold analytics companies. Sorry, that word got stuck. The more we can hold analytics companies accountable to do good testing and to be above the board and all of that. So,
And if you're a medical bud tender or a bud tender that like often talks to somebody about their medical issues, even though you're not a medical professional, knowing how to use a COA to answer some of the questions that your medical patients might bring to you is like so
Absolutely.
necessary. So COAs, love them, learn them, keep them. Don't throw them away.
Don't throw them away. File them. Brands, QR code them. Make them available.
Yes, that.
You know, all of that.
That.
All right.
All right. Are we ready to conclude the last week's BBL Bud Tender Buzzline call-in? Does he fight? Does he not fight? What's going to happen?
Okay. Do we need to reset the stage? Does everyone remember?
Let's reset the stage.
Okay. Okay. So we have customer coming into a dispensary. This dispensary has a medical line and a recreational line. The recreational line is long. The medical line is short. Medical patient goes into the line and demands to be served right away instead of allowing the bud tenders to cruise through some of the recreational line and get some people out who have been waiting for a long time. Medical patient hates that and asks to know when our caller gets off of work.
Because he couldn't serve, or he didn't serve the medical patient first.
Dun, dun, dun.
And our caller is average in every way, but his blue eyes and he cage fights. And that's how it ended. So let's see if his blue eyes and cage fighting.
This is like fairy smut.
Yeah. It's his blue eye. His blue eyes definitely get him glistened out of the situation.
Exactly.
All right. You load a bowl. I'll hit play.
Good idea.
Oh, this is 1 minute and 11 seconds. How cute.
So cute. It is fairy smut.
Good afternoon. It's the user that had the budtender, or had the patient trying to fight him. Basically, all I was saying was I previously cage fought. I still train in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
So he's a badass.
And I was a tad bit younger than this individual, so there's no way that would have turned out positively for him. It pretty much would have just walked him outside and been like, all right, let's take it outside, and then turn around and walk back in. But I just don't understand why a situation had to, end up that way. But yeah, no, he went down and asked the budtender when I got off work, and the lead in charge, talked him back and that sort of thing. But yeah, there was no real ending to that story other than I cage fought, and it wouldn't have turned out good if we had even made it that far. But that's not the point of the whole thing. So yeah, I would have just let it go. But thank you.
That is the point of the whole thing. The point of the whole thing is to be like, if we did, I could have
beat his ass.
But they didn't, so.
And that's what you have to, like that is such a retail example. Like as a retail worker, you want to fight anybody that looks at you wrong, says the wrong thing to you, but you literally
rude assholes.
Have to just let it go. You just have to. And that you just have to smoke it away or call the buzz line.
Call the buzz line.
If you have your frustrations, because it is frustrating to have someone completely disrespect you to your fucking face, and you have to let them walk out the door, and you can't say anything. You can't just be like, wow,
yeah,
you could have been so much nicer than you were. So anyway, I feel that.
I thought I was gonna have 3 minutes to load this bowl. I also thought that there was still flour in the grindy part, so then I ground it and there was no flour, so we missed out on the bowl on this one. Or we'll smoke our way out.
Yeah, we're gonna smoke our way out. So if you have a story, a bud tender story, if you are a bud tender and have a crazy customer, release those inhibitions to our voicemail. If you are a customer and have a story about a bud tender, release those inhibitions into our voicemail. We want to hear them all. We love, honestly, this is one of the best things we've ever thought to do is this bud tender buzz line. So if you want to call in with your own stories, call 360-326-2893. That's 360-326-2893.
Heck yeah. And congratulations, you've made it to the very end of the episode where we offer you a discount code to our online budtender training course. Root Knowledge, a budtender's guide to cannabis. If you are a budtender and you want to shore up your foundational knowledge, or if you're interested in getting in the industry, this course is perfect for you. So go to takeroottraining.com/budtenders to sign up, and then at checkout, enter the code POTHEADS2024 to get $150 off of our $250 course.
Why wouldn't you?
Why wouldn't you?
Why wouldn't you?
Let's learn.
Let's learn. Let's learn together. And if you like to learn more about what this episode was about and more about COAs, sign up for our newsletter down in the show notes. This link down in the show notes is going to also give you a freebie. That's like a little educational tool that goes along with the episodes. And if you sign up today for your freebie, you'll get every other freebie. Every other freebie.
Right to your inbox.
Right to your inbox. So make sure you sign up for the newsletter. Plus, the newsletter is just like the best way for us to be able to engage with you guys in the age of like social media taking everyone's shit down.
Censorship.
Like, we have control over our own newsletter. So if you ever want to make sure our content gets to you, get in that newsletter.
Heck yeah. And if you're interested in getting your hands on Chill Spectrum, our educational coloring book all about terpenes, you can get that online at takeroottraining.com/shop. Please rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast. We want this podcast to go to all the budtenders in the world. So please share with as many people as you can, your coworkers, your friends, your boss. Favorite dispensary.
Send that
brands.
over. Please rate, review, subscribe everywhere. Engage.
You can also follow us on all the social media platforms. We're on Instagram at chronicals_420 and at Take Root Training. We're on Facebook, we're on LinkedIn, and we are on TikTok at take.root.trainin', no G.
All right, potheads, keep learning
and keep growing.
Bye.